in Happy Valley, and I am not here. Believe it or not. Of course, I'm here, but as you're watching this, I'm not here. Full disclosure to the audience, as we always like to do here on Connect Happy Valley A.M. I'm Chris Buchignani. He's Greg Woodman. We're pre-recording this show on a Monday to air tomorrow because as folks are tuning in live, Greg, I am up on Mount Nittany with an arborist doing some work on one of the symbols of our best, not the Nittany Lion or Mike the Mailman, but the greatest natural symbol of Penn State in the Nittany Valley, keeping Mount Nittany beautiful for all the folks this summer.
And we appreciate that. I've hiked it many times with my buddies and my family. It's always an annual event. Love it.
So if I can brag a little bit on our work and what I am working on as you're watching this, I'm a vice president of the Mount Nittany Conservancy, which is a nonprofit local here to the community, celebrating its 45th year. And our job is to own and steward all the land on Mount Nittany to be enjoyed by all. We consider it private land, publicly owned, and experienced by visitors and residents and students and all Penn Staters alike. And so over the last several years, we've seen a lot of growth obstructing the views from the various scenic overlooks on the mountain. And so, it's once or twice a decade, it's necessary to enlist the services of a professional arborist to go up on the mountain and cut back certain branches that are obscuring the views, dead trees that are, just need to be brought down by somebody other than volunteers. And so that's what we have going on right now. A couple times over the course of this summer, we will engage with one of the many great, excellent professional arborists we have here in the community who will go up on Mount Nittany and clear out dead trees that might be a hazard and branches that might be blocking the view of the valley from the various overlooks on our 8+ miles of trails.
It just reminds me, one year for the 4th of July, this Saturday, they shot some fireworks from the top of the Mount Nittany. Were you there for that?
No, I was not. And if I was aware that had gone on, I probably would have discouraged folks from that practice.
But it was just, I thought it was really cool to kind of be there at Medlar and looking at the fireworks. And all of a sudden, we directed our attention to the top of Mount Nittany, and boom, they were shooting off some beautiful fireworks. Dan Barker, who was Fireworks one of the best in the world, organized that event.
Yeah, I may or may not think that's cool and agree with you, Greg, but I'm just going to withhold comment because I don't know if we sanctioned that and I don't know if you're supposed to be doing that. So discretion's the better part of valor on that one.
Okay, it hasn't happened since, but it was a fun evening.
So let's remind the audience where we are. We're at Pine Grove Hall and Pine Grove Mills. Want to encourage everyone, if you've not come out here to experience a meal and ideally some kind of a show, a concert, a performance, a talk, it is one of the coolest, most distinctive venues in the valley, and that's no small feat because it's a place full of them. We've really been, I think, blessed recently, Greg, with a renaissance in unique local establishments, both downtown and in the surrounding areas. And even with that going on, Pine Grove Hall stands out. Their website's pinegrovehall.com. You can check out their event calendar. I talked about the difference in vibe and quality of experience. If there's some kind of a live show, a lot of live music that happens here. They have a great seasonal menu, which you can view at the website, and you can book reservations there. So pinegrovehall.com is a great destination point for when you're planning your next night out here in Happy Valley, and a way to show support for the folks who have done so much to get this program, Connect Happy Valley A.M., off the ground.
Oh, I'm honored to be on the same stage that many live music acts happen here. And the venue seats about 65 here on the ground floor. Another 50 can be on the second floor in this old Odd Fellows building. But this Friday, Lord Forrest is playing. Liz, the owner of Pine Grove Hall and Flower and Stone, will be performing right over here on the keyboard with Steve and his son and a drummer, and they do a lot of 1970s Yes and the Beatles, and just amazing sound in this building, and they did All Good People, and I sat over there in Penny Lane. They do it so well. It's a talk about transformation, and we talked about earlier, it's a very transformational experience, live music in a venue, and you get to know you know a lot of the people in the crowd. It's a wonderful evening.
And we've talked about events that I get to do here with Happy Valley United, the NIL collective that supports the football program. We got an event coming up in July where we're going to be interviewing some members of the Penn State football team. Really a unique situation for Penn State football. And as I've said at some of these shows previously, Greg, I think anywhere in the history of major college football, the way this roster is put together, almost equal portions of players who were part of the program last year and decided to stick it out through a coaching transition, which, as we all know, doesn't happen very often in Happy Valley. Another pretty sizable chunk of this roster being players who came from Iowa State to follow Matt Campbell here. So you've got about 50% of the complement of the team very familiar with Happy Valley and Penn State and the experience of playing for Penn State football. Another 40 or so percent, maybe 35 in that range, of guys who are learning all of those things but very familiar with what it is to play football for Matt Campbell. And then another 10 to 15% who know neither of those things because they came here from elsewhere via the transfer portal. Really unique mix. And so it's been a lot of fun to be able to spend about 15 minutes talking to these guys, different points of origin, different positions. Everybody's got a different story, that what brings them to Penn State and what brings them to the sport of football. And so one of the consistent pieces of feedback I have gotten from folks who have come out to these shows previously, both the public ones and some of the private events we've held, is that if it's their first time at Pine Grove Hall, they're blown away by the character of the place. Just the wood grain and the love that has gone into restoring this venue and giving it a real sense of personality just oozes out of every floorboard, every chandelier, every lighting choice, every decorative aesthetic decision. And so I just want to work as hard as we can to convince people to come experience it once, because I am a firm believer that once you walk in the door, the venue sells itself.
Well, and it's great to be in the audience listening to you interview these players from all over the country and their fascination and their joy of belonging now into this Happy Valley region. They've all said they feel welcome. They're just amazed at the food choices. They're amazed at here at Pine Grove Hall and all the downtown. Certainly the creamery comes up. Just the whole outdoor scene. It's just great to hear it from their words as we welcome them into the community, how much they've taken a shine to it and now are contributing, and they're going to be the characters on the field in our Disney World North, costume characters with helmets that hopefully they can do well this season, and I think they will.
Put a pin in the creamery thing, because I do want to circle back to that and talk about these interviews a little bit. But you mentioned the upstairs of Pine Grove Hall. I don't want to say it's a completely different vibe, but it's decidedly different, but also very cool. And I do, as some viewers may know, as you know, I offer a 3-session course in Penn State football history through the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at Penn State, OLLI, OLLI.psu.edu, if you want to check out their course catalog and sign up for the class when it goes live in August. And so I do a version of that. You know, I'm going to try to do it, I think, at least once a year in the upstairs here at Pine Grove Hall. But you mentioning the upstairs made me think, well, this is a chance to, number one, plug my course, and also just correct a misconception I see is out there. Somebody sent me, there was a whole long thread on the BWI message boards discussing the obligatory pregame show and podcast. I always brace when I get exposed to the public commenting on my work, because you never know what you're going to get. It's kind of like life is like a box of chocolates. Well, sometimes it's a box of something very different that's still brown when you're reading public comments on the internet. Fortunately, they took it pretty easy on me, not so much on my co-host, Kevin Horn, but that's sort of his shtick. He invites that. But I noticed somebody described me as a faculty member at Penn State. Let me just make it abundantly clear. I am not a member of the Penn State faculty. I am a volunteer instructor that teaches one course for lifelong learners. I think most folks on the campus side of College Avenue would rather burn that place to the ground than offer me a seat on the faculty. So I am not a member of the Penn State faculty in any way, shape, or form, nor do I aspire to be, nor shall I ever be.
But you have a sense of the history, and you've studied it intently from the founding of this land-grant university to today. I would consider you one of the most learned, knowledgeable professor, if you will, of history of Penn State.
That speaks more to the company you keep, Greg, than any qualities that I may possess.
I've certainly enjoyed kind of learning a lot about the history and certainly the early days. And then you also do a presentation out here on the history of Penn State football, which I certainly enjoyed, and particularly the 80s. And I enjoyed your history of the university, too, when you talked about the dance marathon in the 70s, and, near and dear to my heart. So yeah, I always end up tearing up at either presentation. And why is that?
Love.
Is it
Love,
the emotion
because it's
we
a
have?
transformational, not just transactional relationship between student and alma mater. That's why.
And so I'm at this event Friday night. I'm listening to Neil Diamond impersonator sing Coming to America. I teared up a little bit about that. Certainly Sweet Caroline. Everybody's standing up. There were 7,000 people. I think average age had to be like 75. And they're just cheering at the end, bop, bop, bop. And so, again, I'm a student of what is this? What is this in real life, human connection? And, and that's why we're here talking about it every day.
Do you want to just take this off in a completely sideways direction? Because it's something I've been thinking about, and you mentioning the Neil Diamond song made me consider it. For the record, by the way, I'm just going to make a confession here. I know everybody loves Sweet Caroline. I hate Neil Diamond, and I hate that song, and I hate when they sing it at Beaver Stadium, and I wish Ted Brown never would have brought it back. There, I admitted it.
That's okay.
But you know what? It makes other people happy, so I'm glad it makes them happy. But I don't know if you remember, Greg. There's let me say this. There's a new college football video game coming out this summer. You're aware of this?
Yes.
The NCAA game from EA Sports was a real big deal. It went away for many years because of the debates over monetizing athlete name, image, and likeness without them getting a cut. And then when it became possible to pay these guys directly under NCAA regs, then the game came back. So I think this is going to be the third iteration since its return coming out this summer. And one of the big stories in college football circles on social media is how are the different players and programs rated in this year's version of the game. And Beaver Stadium in this year's edition, I think, is rated as the second or third most difficult venue for a road team to play. Pretty common these days for Beaver Stadium to make those sorts of lists. Do you remember a time when that was not the case? When despite the high capacity of the stadium, you never saw it listed along with places like the Big House or LSU Stadium or Clemson Stadium, the two Death Valleys that battle over that moniker, and the places that were considered the most challenging venues for a road team to go in and win. Even though Penn State football was great and the capacity of Beaver Stadium was high, it did not have the reputation as one of the most intimidating environments in college football. I mean, we have to go back some decades now, but that was the case once upon a time.
Oh, for sure. The late 70s and 80s and until Miami came here when they started cranking up the music. I don't know what year that was. But
1992.
Yes, and that was kind of a shock to the crowd when they started cranking music up. And with these darn TV timeouts, it got really boring in the stadium before all this hype and the music and the scoreboards and, so yes, it's totally different now. It was very peaceful, church-like in the old days.
That is a good description. So here we go. We're off and running. We're pre-recording this show because I'm up on Mount Nittany with the arborist cutting back the view at the Lynch overlook and the many other beautiful scenic overlooks on Mount Nittany's 8+ miles of trails maintained by the Mount Nittany Conservancy. Visit us at nittany.org. And we're talking about my enjoyment of sharing the Penn State football story with folks. And that is really why I do that. I just love telling a good story, and Penn State football's got a great one, and sharing it with people who I know will appreciate it, because I always say you can enrich your enjoyment of something you love and care about if you know its story and you can put yourself into that. And here we are, we're talking about one of my favorite Penn State stories, which is the transformation of Beaver Stadium and how it went from this almost like mausoleum type atmosphere, where you had 97 at the time, 1,000 people who mostly just sat on their hands unless they were provoked by a certain special confluence of circumstances. So 1982, you're playing under the lights, you have a top 5 matchup and Nebraska comes to town, yeah, the stadium's gonna be loud. But for a rank and file game, for that many tens of thousands of people, they didn't make a lot of noise. I mean, I can tell you, go ahead. You want to say something, go ahead.
No, when you said 97,000, like, I'm an old guy. I started here, I think there were 65,000.
Sure, yeah.
And then they bumped it up during my time. It took me 7 years to graduate. I did have some gap years. It was up to 84,000. You know, so yes.
Yeah, so it was 97 for me. And
we had a track. There was a track around the field.
Yes.
I mean, that was where you had
all OG college football stadiums have that track, and they should bring that track back.
Gym classes, and the cheerleaders would cheer from the track. And so, yes, it was very quiet.
And so you talked about that 1992 Miami game, which unfortunately the Nittany Lions lost. But it was the first time that piped-in music became part of the experience inside Beaver Stadium. And I think partially because of the outcome of that game and that season, and partially because Joe hated it so much, it took a long time for that to reemerge as a key part of the game day experience. But that is an important milestone in the transformation of game day atmosphere. The first time music gets piped in, because that was a really big game. That was a hyped game. Penn State and Miami, I don't remember the rankings, but they were both top 10 teams, both very talented. In fact, if you talk to guys who were part of the great run that Penn State football went on after that season, the 93 team, and then, of course, the undefeated 94, I'll call them national champions, they'll tell you that that 92 squad had as much or more talent. But
who was the quarterback?
That was Tony Sacca's last year.
Okay, got it.
And so it was just a matter of the team coming up a little short in that big game and then losing focus. And talking about this issue of the transformation of the Beaver Stadium experience, I know, talking to guys who were part of those mid-90s teams, you know, Goon and Brandon Noble and some of their former teammates, they'll tell you two things. First of all, the off season between the 92 and 93 seasons was one of the most miserable experiences of their football lives, because a Penn State team that started the year with a lot of promise ended it, I think 7-5 with a loss to Stanford in the Blockbuster Bowl. And Noble tells this story. He's a freshman just traveling along for the ride because he's redshirting. And Paterno gets on the bus after the game, and he says, "Guys, I have to apologize to you. This is one of the worst coaching jobs I've done in my career, and I took my eye off the ball, and I am just going to make sure that this never happens again." And so Brandon says he's thinking to himself, okay, all right. And he's looking around at the faces of all the upperclassmen. And he said it's just ashen-faced expressions all over the bus. And so he said, Paterno gets back off the bus and he says, why is everybody looking so down? And they just told him, you have no idea what that means. You have no idea what we are in for. And he said Paterno worked those guys like they had never been worked before that offseason. But what did it yield? Some of the most successful campaigns of Joe's career to follow. But the other thing that those guys have all consistently said is that even on the field, they understood that the game day environment, the influence of the crowd was not consistently going to be an advantage they enjoyed at home. It was amazing to play in front of that many people. But for that many people, they made conspicuously little amount of noise, whether it was 65 or 84 or 97,000, a lot of the time. And every time I say this, somebody pushes back and say, oh, well, this game or this play. I'm like, yeah, I get it. I understand. Every once in a while, you can get 90+ thousand people to make a lot of noise, but that was not the expectation, and it tended to be the exception to the rule.
And things have certainly changed with the whiteout. And was it Guido that brought, talk about Guido and what he did.
So let's talk about how we got here.
Yeah, get to how we got here. But you mentioned we played in the Blockbuster Bowl, and we used the word transformation quite a bit.
Yeah.
And Joe transformed that team after the 7-5 season. And then Guido comes and transforms the game day experience. And this, maybe that's the underlying theme, is transformation. But talk about how Beaver Stadium was expanded to 108, and then there's just the in-game environment changed and transformed tremendously.
So one of the great unsung heroes of the Penn State football story is Guido D'Elia. I think his official title was something like Director of Branding and Marketing for Penn State football. His real job was he was Joe Paterno's consigliere, and he was visionary, is the correct word, in arguing for a term we came up with a couple weeks ago that I really liked on the show was avoiding sacrificing soul for scale. Guido was visionary in understanding how to scale the Penn State football experience in a way that was rooted in the soul of the program. And what made Penn State football distinct and unique in the sports landscape from its peers among the top programs. So he took the Beaver Stadium experience and he transformed it for a new time and a new audience, but at no point did he sacrifice the substance of what it meant to be Penn State football. And you talked about the most recent expansion of the stadium prior to the renovation that's happening right now. That was after the 2000 season when they added the second level onto the south end zone, unfortunately obscuring the view of Mount Nittany, but adding to the capacity of the stadium, club seats, luxury boxes added on the east side opposite the press box. And it happened to coincide with probably the worst era of on-field results since the program got rid of athletic scholarships in the 1930s. 2000 to 2004, Joe Paterno and Penn State football had 4 losing seasons in 5 years. And to put that into perspective, prior to that abysmal 5-year stretch, Penn State had had 1 losing season under Joe, which was 1988. And that was the program's first losing season in 50 years. So it didn't happen very often, even when we weren't paying athletic scholarships. And then all of a sudden, at the peak of the program's power, but as Joe was starting to get up there in years, the wheels just came completely off. And it really seemed like perhaps the game had passed him by, and that was going to be the end of his legendary career, that we were just going to peter out, and everybody would remember Joe as a guy who for decades had the touch and stuck around a little too long, and maybe in many ways irreparably damaged what he had built up. Because there's no other coach in the country, Greg, who would have survived to author a comeback story if they had 4 losing seasons in 5 years the way Joe did. And so the challenge for Guido was, how do I plus up the stadium experience at a time when the team is not giving the crowd a whole lot to cheer about?
And so what did he do?
Well, what do you think he did? I've been talking a lot. I'm curious about how you recall the story, either from your own experience or from maybe listening to me talk about it when I
Well, Tim
tell
Curley,
the story of
Tim
Penn State
Curley was
football.
the athletic director, and evidently Guido kept on pitching his idea to do a whiteout. And it started out with the students doing a whiteout. And what year was that?
So 2004.
So that was the very first whiteout, student section only. And then it grew from there.
Yeah, so a few things Guido did. First of all, it was his brainchild to utilize the new video boards to do more than show replays and throw up little messages that say, hey, it's third down, cheer loud. So the pregame video, the pump-up video, the first one was put to music from the Gladiator soundtrack. That film had just come out a few years earlier, and it was just amazing. Amazing in that you talk about not sacrificing soul for scale. The whole theme of the video was built around the identity of the program. No name on the jerseys, basic blues, black shoes, playing for coach, playing for alma mater, for those who came before. Nevertheless, a complete change from what you had come to expect from a college football game and certainly from Beaver Stadium. So the pump-up videos pregame. The music getting played in. I always like to show people when I do my Penn State football history lectures little screen caps of the Daily Collegian archives of people sending in letters to the editor in that '04 season, absolutely miserable, 4 wins, complaining about, can we please stop playing this irritating techno song 8 times a game? Every time Penn State gets a defensive stop or the team takes the field, there's this loud, blaring techno music. Can we just stop with that? There was a lot of pushback. And then, yeah, the idea that we could give the whole stadium a sense of energy and focus and unity by recognizing that the student section would lead the way and giving the students a sense of unity by having them all dress in the same color. So a little nudge here and there, pre-Facebook, pre-social media, a lot of people driving around campus in golf carts with megaphones and putting yard signs up in all the dormitory complexes, telling everybody to wear white, get the word out to the Daily Collegian, which everybody picked up free on their way to class every day. Wear white for the Purdue game. And so it was 2004. The team was terrible. The offense, one of the worst you could possibly imagine. And Heisman Trophy candidate Kyle Orton came in, quarterback of the Purdue Boilermakers. And yes, Purdue left victorious because the offense was bad, but Orton's Heisman campaign left in tatters because the defense played so well. And the spectacle of the whiteout, that striking aesthetic of that block of students all in white, and the school spirit that it engendered left a mark. People who watched it in the stadium or on TV, they remembered the visual. And students who were a part of it remembered how fun it was. And so that planted seeds that would then be picked up when the on-field product caught up to the enthusiasm of the students who were still there supporting their team.
And that happened in 2005.
Correct. And so to bring just all of this full circle to talk about Sweet Caroline and why it makes you feel something when you're at a Neil Diamond concert now, because it immediately transports you back to being part of this greatest show in college football, this thing that has become a bucket list item for college football enthusiasts from sea to shining sea, to be part of that 100,000 strong sea of humanity. It's almost like a Southern Baptist revival church experience inside Beaver Stadium. Well, it goes back to that misery of slogging through one losing season after another, that fear of having lost something that we took for granted that may never return again, which was the magic of the Paterno Penn State football experience. And then the one season that in the span of 4 wonderful months of autumn in Happy Valley restored all of it. unlooked for, unexpected. And the Saturday night primetime matchup between number 16 Penn State and number 6 Ohio State. That was a chance for that team to prove that they belonged back among the elite of the sport, somewhere where we always felt was the place for Penn State, but also a place where undeniably we had no business through the first half or the first decade of the 21st century. And that night, which I will never forget as long as I live, Beaver Stadium is packed to the rafters. It's just the right conditions environmentally. We're at the right part of October where everything is dark, pitch black, and so that whiteout is just lit beautifully by those stadium lights with just a really fine mist coming down. So it's like Big Ten football weather, the high intensity contrast of the bright white of the student section and the dark black of the night sky lit by the Beaver Stadium lights, and the stakes of the restoration of Penn State football playing out in front of a national television audience, with College Game Day having been there on campus for the first time in forever earlier in the day. And so all of those innovations that I talked about, that Guido very stubbornly fought to push through and foist on the very staid, very mausoleum-like Beaver Stadium experience in a downtime for the program, just all instantaneously blossomed at once as Penn State took control of that football game. And so when Michael Robinson punched in a go-ahead touchdown to give Penn State a 7-3 lead early, and then Calvin Lowry, senior safety, intercepted Troy Smith, the Ohio State quarterback, on the ensuing possession and returned the ball down to the 3-yard line to set up what was going to be another score, the lid blew off Beaver Stadium just as Guido punched up Zombie Nation. So that techno song that everybody had been complaining about, this is not Penn State football, this is not Beaver Stadium, this is not college, it's annoying, you play it too much. All of a sudden, it was infused in that moment with all of the energy and all of the aspirations and all of the pent-up frustration and aspiration and appreciation and affection that constitutes a relationship between Penn Staters and Penn State and the Nittany Valley, all came pouring out in that one moment. And you had 100,000 people, from the students leading the way in the whiteout to 80-year-old grandmas, jumping up and down and shaking that place. I will never, as long as I live, forget the metallic hum in the air, the old erector set, vibrating from the crowd, jumping up and down. And that one moment, Greg, that one moment that distills the love a people have for their place and their school and their team has radiated outward and created the conditions in which Guido, as the conductor of the orchestra, and all of us, from the student section to the alumni to the fans to the blue band to the coaches and the team, could all come together in concert and create from nothing, from thin air, what is now nationally renowned as one of the most challenging but also memorable environments in which to play a college football game. And that's the story of Penn State football. Moments like that, and knowing what it took to create the conditions that allowed that to happen. You can trace everything back to that night in early October, Penn State versus Ohio State. And you can then backwards engineer how we got from there to here, and you at a Neil Diamond concert in June of 2026 getting some goose pimples thinking about being inside Beaver Stadium with 100,000 people all dressed in white singing that stupid Neil Diamond song that I hate so much.
And that was in 2005. Do you remember the exact date?
I want to say October the 7th.
And that's when Tom Bahali tackled Troy Smith?
Yes, sir. And Scott Paxson recovered the fumble.
And he went up on his head. Oh, classic moment. Told so well, Chris. Thank you for bringing us back to 2005. And you reminded us that was after 4 losing seasons in a row.
So 4 in 5 years.
4 and 5
2000
years.
and 2001, broken up by the Larry Johnson season in 2002 when he ran for 2,000 yards, and then another 2 losing seasons. Brutal.
And then they won in triple overtime against Bobby Bowden in the Orange Bowl. Wow.
Finished number 3 in the nation.
Wow. So those are the moments that cause the Neil Diamond, Sweet Caroline to reverberate in our brains, but more importantly in our hearts, that can cause some misty-eyedness, because it all gets back to belonging.
And it gets back to football is the means to the end. It's not the end unto itself. Yes, we care about the winning, and yes, we care about the recruiting, and there are subsections of the fan base that are deeply invested in the football as an end unto itself. That cause does not put 100+ thousand butts in seats when the game is played, nor does it put more than 100,000 people in cow pastures all around the stadium for 8 to 12 hours prior.
And during those 4 out of 5 losing seasons, the stadium was filled. The tailgate fields were humming early in the morning till late at night.
Penn Staters everywhere owe an incalculable debt to the students who were here during that time period, 03 to 05 especially, the ones who crossed over from the misery to the catharsis, because they never gave up the ship. When the program was at its lowest, their enthusiastic expression of school spirit and love for Penn State was at its best. And so they led the way. They catalyzed this transformation of Beaver Stadium from one of the more underwhelming for its size venues for college football to one of the best on the planet. And when the moment was ripe for them to seize on that leadership position they had earned with their patience and their belief in the program when it was at its lowest, they were at their very best when the spotlight was brightest. So yeah, man, it's a generation of Penn Staters who, whether they realized it or not, gave a gift to alma mater and to every heart that loves the name of dear old state before, during, and after.
Well, let's talk about all the sports here at Penn State. We have 31 sports, many club sports, and that also enriches those who live here. That we have wrestling, we have basketball, we have cross country. There is every weekend.
Well, I don't know about basketball, but the rest of them, yeah.
Well, there's just so many entertainment options.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so many entertainment options when you get to know these student athletes. Lacrosse, hockey, Pagula with the new hockey arena, Happy Valley. We talk about cranes. I mean, it's just ever ending, the enjoyment of the sports scene here. Tennis, golf, even cross country, running through the blue and white course. I mean, the athletes coming all the way from now USC and Washington. I mean, it's just one. We talked about the students enriching our town, but these student athletes, I just saw the Learfield statistics just came out, and we finished 21st in the country.
Yeah, not great.
What's your take on us slinking down to 21 when we used to be always in the top 5?
What did I say earlier? Discretion is the better part of valor. I think I'm going to keep my powder dry on that one. That's more of an obligatory PSU podcast topic.
Okay, we'll keep off because we look at life through rose-colored glasses here. But yes, some challenges this past year, but we'll be back this year.
It was just a lot of up and down for the athletic. It's funny. I mean, any year in which you win a national championship in any sport can't be described as a down year. And again, foolishly, perhaps in the same way that we came to take top 10 competitive college football under Joe Paterno for granted, I think we are absolutely starting to take for granted the almost unparalleled dominance of the wrestling program under Cale Sanderson, and we ought not. We ought to appreciate it for what it is, year to year to year. And so what wrestling did this past season in the annals of that and any collegiate sport was remarkable. And you look at a Frozen Four appearance for the women's ice hockey team. You look at a Big Ten title for the men's lacrosse team. Even what football did, in many ways, one of the most disappointing seasons in Penn State history, and in others, for me, the most fun I have had watching Penn State football in well over a decade. So it's not always what happens in between the lines, as that story of Zombie Nation and the transformation of the Beaver Stadium experience, I hope, illustrates. It's about the experiences you have, the memories you make, and a lot of that comes down to the people and places in your life.
Well, and since you mentioned Zombie Nation, and the stadium shook so grandly, they had to say no more Zombie Nation. It almost brought down Beaver Stadium, the famous erector set.
Yeah, they had to bring in some structural engineers to make sure the place wasn't going to come down around our ears when we got overly enthusiastic in supporting our team, which is a badge of honor as far as I'm concerned. But they also, is my understanding, they had to cap the amount of time that clip would play just to make sure that nobody shook the stadium to its foundations.
Well, and now next season, fall of 2027, we have a new stadium that's going to be opened up. What's your take? More cranes up there, but it's going to be a spectacular year-round venue now. What's your comment about yet another amenity, another asset coming to Happy Valley in this age of abundance that we have here in this rich soil, bucolic Happy Valley?
It's a double-edged sword, in my opinion.
Why? The $700 million investment?
First of all, the grumpy old man in me, which is a not insignificant voice inside my head, will always sympathize with Joe's view that that turf is sacred ground. It ought not be used more than 7 times a year. Nevertheless, the practical part of me that loves the unfolding story of Penn State and Happy Valley, which is as much as any facet of our lives about change, I do love the idea that it will become a concert venue in a place that contributes to the variety of options that we love to brag on here on Connect Happy Valley A.M. that we have in this community. So I have mixed feelings about it, but that's okay. I mean, I don't like Neil Diamond. That ain't going to stop 100,000 people from enthusiastically belting out Sweet Caroline 7 times this fall. I don't have to love every single thing that happens here in Happy Valley, and I don't completely love that it's going to become a concert venue.
Well, I certainly
Beaver Stadium, that
I
is.
certainly enjoyed the hockey game that was
That was
held here.
awesome.
So.
But they say they're not going to do that again in forever.
Oh, they'll be doing that. Maybe we'll have the Flyers and the Penguins tee it off there.
Listen, to that point, I do think when the stadium's done, we're going to get an NHL Winter Classic, or probably more likely a Stadium Series game, because a Winter Classic is played on New Year's Day. If you're gonna bring pro hockey to Beaver Stadium, why would you do it when the students aren't here? And why would you do it when it might potentially conflict with Penn State football playing a bowl game? So I think a Stadium Series game in late January, early February makes more sense. Do it when classes are in session. And when you do the first one, you do not want the smoke of Philly versus Pittsburgh. This is, I experienced what campus was like when there was maybe a possibility that there was going to be a Pittsburgh-Philly Super Bowl, or when there were intense playoff series between Flyers and Penguins fans. You do not want, inside Beaver Stadium, 80, 90,000 strong crowd that is split down the middle between drunk Flyers and Penguins fans. You don't want it. The cops don't want it. The risk management people don't want it. Let's throw a bone to our buddy Terry Pagula. Thank you so much for the gift that has been varsity ice hockey to Happy Valley, to Hockey Valley. Let's get the Sabres in here and let them play the Penguins, and everybody will go home safer, and that beautiful new $700 million stadium won't get burnt to the ground.
I always love when you go into the depth of the passion that Philadelphia sports fans have.
It cuts both ways. What I am telling you is that's oil and water when you get those two fan bases together. Now, the Steelers and the Eagles, the Pirates and the Phillies, Pirates and Phillies used to be a rivalry, really isn't anymore because they're no longer the same division. There's some antagonism when you get Eastern and Western Pennsylvanians together, but Flyers-Penguins is one of the most serious rivalries in the NHL, and people take that crap seriously. You do not want that mixture of youthful energy, booze, and the Flyers-Penguin rivalry inside Beaver Stadium. Bad things will happen. I mean, it would be fun, don't get me wrong, but we don't want that smoke.
Okay. So I want to switch a little bit to, kind of
Do it.
Back to Connect Happy Valley and what we're doing. We always talk about transformation. I do want to plug a little bit that we've been experimenting with this live stream on YouTube and really enjoyed the feedback from people who have kind of stumbled upon it. We're going to have an app that we're going to be launching here in the next 2 weeks. We got a refreshed, brand new website, and we're going to have a print guide that's going to go in the hotel rooms.
Which you and I are excited about because we love that stuff.
We love print.
Yeah.
I love print. I love the old daily newspaper. And so it's been a lot of fun in just getting this up and off the ground on connecting with so many people. And we're going to soon be having guests. Who are you most excited to get up here on our show? And, afterwards, we're going to put our guest list together. Ooh. We want to talk to many of the people who are the heart and soul of these third places where we gather, the restaurants, you mentioned Zeno's. The Corner Room's having its 100th year anniversary. They're having a big block party here in early July. So for our audience, when you talk about the Corner Room, the Tavern, I can't wait to interview the people who have perpetuated and have kept these things going, like Liz, who owns Pine Grove Hall and Flower and Stone. Gary, who has all the area hotels, who's now offering up shares of stock for the alums to purchase shares of stock into our lodging scene here in town. You can own a piece of Happy Valley. Who are you most excited about having here in front of the camera and us doing articles about and amplifying and being the connector to our audience to these places and to activate the local people to enjoy these places and to enjoy each other at a deeper level?
Well, I'm excited to have Sue Paterno on to talk about Rise Above and the event coming up at the end of July with keynote speaker Terry Smith. Go to PennStateRiseAbove.org to get your tickets for that. Probably just as exciting, I think, for longtime Penn State football fans, for me, will be not just hearing Terry speak, but getting to hear Mike Reed, former absolute terror on the defensive line for the undefeated teams at 68 and 69. Also a Grammy Award-winning musician, is actually going to perform live, which is not too common these days for Mike.
Not too common. And he grew up right now, too, 35, 40 minutes away.
So I'm excited for that. I am looking forward to interviewing some of what I would describe as the Disney characters of State College, the people who have been just long-time regulars, observers, to give credit to the great Paul McCartney, the fools on the hill, watching the world of Happy Valley go by. And you talk about the Corner Room and the Tavern, these venues. I am looking forward, Greg, to talking with some of the proprietors and the brewers and distillers and the vintners of all these local businesses that are now all united together under the umbrella of the Central Pennsylvania Tasting Trail. Because one of the stories of the Nittany Valley that I have particular affection for is the connection and the evolution of small batch craft beverage and this place. Because you can't tell the story, like it or lump it, of American higher education, and really education of any kind, going all the way back to Socrates and the educational value of drinking parties, without talking about the relationship between society and alcohol, right? Well, we've got our own unique spin on that here in Happy Valley. As I've talked about before, the Center Daily Times was the first daily newspaper in America to publish a regular column on beer back in the 1980s. A lot of people had wine columns in their newspaper. Nobody had a beer column until the CDT did it first. In fact, it became so popular that home brewing was re-legalized in 1979, which then catalyzed a decade of growth that evolved into what we now know as the microbrew movement. So as that was growing in the 80s, enthusiasts from all over the country would share clippings of the CDT's beer column by mail. So you could go into bars out on the West Coast or in Denver or in Washington State, and you could find, if it was a good beer bar, there would be framed copies of Center Daily Times editorials on the walls of these good beer bars, because this was this undercurrent of subculture forming largely through correspondence back then, because you didn't have the internet, right? And to carry that forward then, as the craft brew movement was starting to mature, an opportunity for all the enthusiasts to gather together became a great way to share information and pick up new tips and refine your craft. And the the State College Microbrewers Exposition, which was started by Greg Summers in the 1990s, used to be held up at the Penn Stater. That became one of the only events of its kind in the country. So you would get people who were starting small breweries or were in the process of thinking through how they might do so, all gathering together, and it was really more like a trade convention than it was a beer festival. And Happy Valley was significant to the growth of the craft brew movement in just providing a venue for all those people to get together and meet one another and share ideas. So every microbrewery we have, every winery, every distillery, it's an outgrowth of our unique piece of the craft beverage revolution in this country. And so getting to talk to the folks who are making that go on the ground level, and it is a true passion project, is something I'm really looking forward to.
Oh, that's great. And as you were telling that story, it makes me think of Rolling Rock. You know, out of
I
Latrobe.
drank a lot of Rolling Rock when I was an undergrad, that's for sure.
Out of Latrobe, Pennsylvania, and that's where Sue Paterno went to high school and grew up. Arnold Palmer's from there, and he won a state title here in the blue course or the white course. He won 2 state titles, I was reminded after the last show here. He won his junior and senior year here at the Penn State Golf Course. But the Rolling Rock and the Rathskeller, which is now Doggies, in that famous 1933 bottle. In one of the great websites on Facebook, as I went to Penn State when the Skeller sold ponies. These were these little 7-ounce bottles. You get a case put on your table.
The case race, I remember it well.
And you do a case study on a Friday afternoon for happy hours, and that place was packed, and everybody would have a case of these 7-ounce bottles. You know, again, emotion, feelings. It was that sense of belonging right there in the old Skeller, which is now Doggies, which is flourishing. They're actually expanding, and they have wonderful outdoor venue down there now, and they're expanding. But yes, I guess beer and higher education has always been intertwined.
No question. And, I realize we're not going to have time in today's show to get into the creamery point I wanted to make. So let's just set it aside. Wednesday's show, we're going to talk about the Berkey Creamery at Penn State. Now, I'll pick up this thought. But to talk about the case race and uniqueness of place and sense of place and what it means to be a college town. You remember once a year they would do the event where they'd open up early and they would try to set a new Guinness record, Guinness Book of World Records, which was a thing back in the day, for number of cases of beer sold and consumed on premises. And they set that record, I think, back in the 80s and then broke it a few times on Case Race Day over the years, yes?
Yes.
So I was the only person in my group of friends from my Pollock dormitory, shout out Porter Hall, I hope they don't renovate it, but they will, in freshman year. And so I stayed friends with those guys through college. I stayed friends with them through my life to this point. But I was the only one with any family ties back to Penn State. Many of them were first-generation college students. And so I had grown up listening to my uncle and my dad tell me stories about Penn State, and one of them was about the case race, and I was fascinated that I was going to get to Penn State, and I was, when I was old enough, going to get to participate in this tradition. And the only reason we got to case race day was because that whole group of 8 to 10 guys had me in it as a link in the chain to say, hey, all the rest of you, all the rest of the 9, we're about to go become part of a tradition at Penn State that I only know about because I heard about it through stories from a family member who was in a prior generation. And boy, Greg, the lesson of that community and time and being just a little link in that continuum, it stuck with me then and it's never left me. And it's made me realize and appreciate what it is to be in a place that has a culture that is rich enough that it gets into your gut, that these sorts of rituals get handed down from generation to generation. And it was a privilege, frankly, for me to do that for my classmates when I was at Penn State. And it's part of my mission in life that I've articulated to you, which is put your roots down in a place and for the love of God, try to leave it a little better than you found it.
Boy, culture, roots, traditions, passed down, the oral history. Yeah, I just started spinning through my head back again to the 70s and 80s. Gentle Thursday, my Sci 500, the Cy Bearish Regatta. You know, there were so many events. Well, the dance marathon continues on. But a lot of these things started in the 60s and 70s. The Arts Festival started in the 60s. You know, and that's happening next week. We'll have a couple 100,000 people pour in, artists from all over the world. We have the People's Choice, which is out in Boalsburg again.
Can I get a ruling from you, by the way, on Arts Festival versus Arts Fest?
It's called the Central Pennsylvania, I believe, Festival of the Arts.
Neat. What do you call it?
I call it the Arts Fest.
Yes, that's right. That's what everybody calls it. So years ago, the very, very first season that the obligatory pregame show went to television, we were on PCN, which is like C-SPAN for Pennsylvania. But it was great. We're in 3 million cable households all across Pennsylvania, which was a pretty cool thing. The very first show we did was not for the 2017 football season. It was for Blue-White. We did a Blue-White game show that year. And we did it, only time we ever filmed out there, it was just a one-shot deal at Home Delivery Pizza, which is now a marijuana dispensary. But we filmed it out there, and it was quite a different experience than doing it for YouTube, doing it for real TV. And one of our promotional sponsors was the Central Pennsylvania Festival of the Arts. And so they were very emphatic that they wanted us to not call it Arts Fest because that's associated with partying and drinking. And you talked about the kids coming back and getting the last month out of their lease and having a good time in State College. No, please call it Arts Festival. Now, I'm a firm believer, Greg, a firm believer that the customer is always right. So we called it Arts Festival, but we had to keep stopping and cutting and redo because we were calling it Arts Fest. So I was just curious. Nobody calls it Arts Festival. I think, can we definitively say that unless they want to pay us money, in which case I'll call it whatever they want, we here at Connect Happy Valley A.M. are proudly in the Arts Fest camp. Is that just me, or are you going to sign on? Are you going to co-sign?
I'm for that too, but we do want to interview them. You know, again, there's so many cool
Sure,
activities.
we'll interview them. We'll be like, guys, the name of your product is Arts Fest. It is what it is. I don't know what you want me to tell you.
We'll ask the executive director, and kind of, I think it's the Festival of the Arts. We should probably call it the Festival of the Arts. Is starting a week Wednesday from here. The Children's Day, and it runs through Sunday. We're going to have some amazing bands coming in town.
Look, we're not going to ask them about it. We're not going to make a big deal out of it. This is just, for me, this is coming to America. His mama named him Clay. I'm going to call him Clay. It's Arts Fest, okay? You ask me, it's Arts Fest.
So we got about a minute left, Chris. So
yes.
How do you want to wrap up? We've covered so many topics today.
I don't know.
All coming back to family, tradition, what's important now, when, human flourishing, human connection. We want to be the amplification of connecting people to third places, connecting people to each other. Penn State's going to be leaning into this. We call them soft skills. We want to be the amplifier, the signal and the noise that this is the value of life. And right here in Happy Valley is our slice of paradise that we want to share with everyone.
Well, you said it as well as I possibly could. I appreciate the opportunity to tell a great, I hope, Penn State football story today, so thank you for indulging that. I'm up on Mount Nittany right now, cutting back our scenic overlook, so please hike Mount Nittany and enjoy the beautified view vistas, and go to connecthappyvalley.com and sign up for the weekly e-letter, and to pinegrovehall.com to schedule a time to come on out and have a great meal. We'll talk to you tomorrow, everybody. So long.
We got practice on 2 hours.
Yeah.
I think guests would give us a lot of breaks.
Oh, no.